Have you ever wondered if there really are people capable of the supernatural? This is a question on the minds of many people, and it is a question that scientists tried to answer in the 70s of the last century. In our video, we will tell you about a major study that involved not only psychologists and neurologists, but also physicists and magicians. Yes, you have not misheard. The commission included real masters of illusion to help solve the puzzles posed by participants with unusual abilities. So get ready for some interesting discoveries. Tatyana Chernigovskaya, a well-known scientist and popularizer of science, will share the details of this amazing experiment. She will tell how one of the participants was able to move objects with her gaze, and how this shocked the scientists themselves. I am serious about mysticism, but I cannot stand domestic mysticism, when they say that all sorts of evil is walking right here between cups and plates. But if we take this mysticism in the direction of, for example, the ability to transmit thoughts or to influence physical objects with the help of thoughts, then this question becomes serious, provided that we do not discuss it as grandmothers on the bench say, "Someone said something." The fact that parapsychological phenomena exist is true. And the fact that many scientists in different countries have tried to verify them, using scientific methods of course, is also a fact. By the way, I took part in one of these tests. Tatyana Chernigovskaya, a scientist in the field of neuroscience, replied to the question about mysticism. Tatyana Chernigovskaya talked about a large study of people with psychic abilities conducted by Soviet scientists. According to Tatyana, the initiators of this study got very different results than they expected. Chernigovskaya told what the scientists found. In the 70s of the last century, something amazing happened in the USSR. A commission was set up at the Academy of Sciences to test psychic abilities. And no, it was not some sensational news for the general public, it was much more serious. This commission included real gurus of science, neurologist and one of the founders of neuropsychology Alexander Luria, experimental psychologist Vladimir Zinchenko, physicists, and even doctors. And to make things really interesting, the commission invited magicians. Yes, exactly, as will become clear later. Tatyana Chernigovskaya, a well-known scientist, says that this large-scale study mainly involved women with unusual abilities. After the experiment, she decided to ask Vladimir Zinchenko about the results. And this is what he told her: "We are convinced that such abilities exist, but how they work remains a mystery." Can you imagine? Scientists were really witnessing unusual phenomena. For example, there was a woman sitting in front of the committee who could move objects with her eyes. She placed a matchbox on her narrow edge and it simply moved to the side without falling over. The physicists were amazed, because it meant that she was not only moving the box, but also keeping it in the right position. Wow! According to Tatyana, what matters is not how far it moved, but the fact that it moved. This discovery could undermine the foundations of many scientific disciplines. The commission also studied a woman who was able to suspend the sphere in mid-air. The scientists carefully checked that there were no strings or magnets, and invited magicians to help solve the mystery. But sadly, no one ever found out how it worked. And that's not all. This study involved a woman who could tell the exact time without looking at the face of a watch. The dial was covered with a plaster. The person supervising the purity of the experiment had another watch that ran second to second with the taped watch. The woman put her hand on the watch and called out the time to the nearest second. So if you thought that psychic abilities were just fairy tales, it might be worth taking a second look. Sure, a lot of people have a sense of time, but they don't have this precision down to the second. A person can tell the time with a margin of error of 10 to 20 minutes. There are a lot of people like that. But who can tell the time to the second like this woman? This experiment was carried out several times, and each time the time was given accurately. What is this? We had a project in our laboratory. I was already working at the Sechenov Institute. We started inviting women who acted with their hands. We tested them and found nothing, except for one thing. The right hemisphere was dominant in all of them. Let's talk about something really mysterious and fascinating: psychic abilities. Many scientists dream of finding a scientific explanation for these phenomena, and indeed they are actively studying them. But here's the rub: science requires repeatability and statistics, and in the world of psychics, as you know, this is not always possible. Getting people with special abilities to participate in research is not an easy task. Stars like Duna, for example, simply refuse to take part in experiments. Why is that? They argue that such research requires an enormous amount of energy and effort, and that they have nothing to prove to anyone because they are confident in their abilities. And those who have not achieved such status are often afraid that they will simply be called charlatans and their gift will not be recognized. This, of course, does not help their confidence when it comes to scientific research. Tatyana Chernigovskaya points out that it is very difficult to record these abilities. It can happen that during an experiment someone cannot demonstrate his or her gift, but an hour later or the next day everything changes. And although scientific methods cannot yet explain these phenomena, Chernigovskaya is sure that such abilities exist. Interestingly, Natalia Bektereva, a famous neuropsychologist, has also shown interest in such phenomena. She said that the absence of an explanation does not mean the absence of the phenomenon itself. Bektereva was a brave woman, and she risked her reputation by raising such issues. She even shared her dreams, which strangely coincided with real negative events. Tatyana Chernigovskaya also shared a personal experience. She had a sense of danger, which was later confirmed. This shows that the world of psychic abilities is not just fiction, but something that requires our attention and research. My grandmother, who was no mythmaker, told me a story. She lived in Leningrad during the blockade. One night my grandmother woke up in an inexplicable panic. My future father, her son, was at the front. My grandmother thrashed around the house, not understanding why she was so frightened. And then it turned out to be the moment her son was wounded. How do you explain that? Some of the scientists suggest that it may be related to some kind of information field that stores information about everything that happens and is accessed by people with psychic abilities. Science continues to seek answers to many mysteries, and one of the most intriguing is the question of the existence of an information field. Tatyana Chernigovskaya points out that at present science has no clear arguments to confirm or deny its existence. The same is true of our consciousness. She cites an interesting quote from the scientist Pedro Ferreira, who says, "Consciousness does not fit into the physical picture of the world." As a physicist and cosmologist, I can say that there is nothing to grasp it with. It is nowhere to be found. There are only its effects. Sounds mysterious, doesn't it? Tatyana explains that everyone knows that consciousness exists, but what it is and how to measure it remains a complete mystery. Pedro Ferreira suggests that consciousness may be related to some quantum anomalies. He thinks it should be studied by physicists, not just psychologists or philosophers. And the situation is similar in the information field. If scientists are ever able to recognize it, they may have to revise the whole scientific picture of the world. That's why Tatyana says, "I'm not saying that the information field doesn't exist. It's just that as a scientist I can't say anything about it yet." This raises many questions. What else might we be overlooking in our world? And how many secrets are still waiting to be discovered?